Hello. Let's see how long it takes for my laptop to come out of suspend. Come on. All right, one of the things I have to ask, who here knows what /dot is and use it? I've got a few hands. I just have to figure out how much time I have to spend explaining to you how awesome it is. Maybe it was a bad idea to let them put my laptop into suspend while the intro is talked. Now, the other thing that I have to do, my wife never believes me that people like actually come and want to see me talk. Now you've all been documented. Is anybody... beginning to think that I don't have power either here, and I might cry. When in doubt, reboot. And I run a Mac, too. I'm sorry about this. And sadly, I don't even have my first slide memorized. All right, we'll reboot. That'll work. Well, I guess I can start by telling you a little bit about me and a little bit about /dot and a little bit about what I'm here to say. Let's see. Let's start by talking about what /dot is. /dot, our slogan is news for nerds. We are very unapologetic about that. We are geeks. We are interested in nerdly things. And if you don't like it, you probably shouldn't be reading /dot. /dot was started, we are almost a decade old, which I don't know, like they talk about dog years, and like it's what, like 9 human years to a dog year or whatever. I figure in internet years, a decade of internet years makes us maybe 1 million. Let's see. Let's see if I know my password. Sweet. So I guess we're as far as the internet goes, we're old. I mean, really, really old. When we started it back in 1997, like Google didn't exist, Yahoo and those guys were just barely existing. At the time, I was a college student, so I guess I was barely existing. Just sort of getting by. Oh, see, we even got a screen now. We're like halfway there. I also have to apologize when I get started. I have a little bit of a tendency to talk fast, which means I already apologized to the translators. But I totally wanted to do this. I don't know any Spanish. I wanted to try it. Okay. What happens if I say gracias? How do you say that in Spanish? Oh, sweet. I totally know Spanish. The only other word I think I know is tapas. It's also telling me now that I have lots of email to read, which is also probably not particularly surprising. I'm sorry about this, folks. Mental note, don't let them turn off your laptop, ever. Don't let them close the screen. Not a good idea. Not cool. It's a very pretty background image. I should expense a new laptop. I think I've clicked 3 times to have this program launch. Probably not a very good commercial for Macs. I saw one Mac. Actually, that's the nice thing. When you look into a crowd, you can totally see everybody who has the Mac because they have the little glowing, ominous Apple logo. Everybody else, they wish they had the Macs. Well, let's see. I'll try to go back a little bit and tell you some stories while I'm waiting for this thing to load. Back in '97, I was a college student. The internet was a wild and untamed place. It was vastly different. People did not do that thing that we call blogging now. It was very different. Geeks had no place to go. It was lonely. It was sad. It was pathetic. And I set about to change all that. All right. I'm Rob Malda. That's the first slide, see? It's right there. It worked. It totally booted. I started Slashdot. On Slashdot, if you see Commander Taco, that's what I go by. And what that actually is, it's a reference. Dave Barry wrote an article many years ago that I read in high school where he had a list of places you should, if you're trying to impress a girl, restaurants you should never take a date. And the restaurant, he said you should never take a date to a restaurant called the Commander Taco, which amused me tremendously. Before that, my nickname was Icarus, but that was just with a bunch of friends. And then I started using the internet. I started with BBSs in the '80s, and I used Icarus as my nickname. And then when I started using the internet, in the early '90s, I realized that there was about 852 trillion other Icaruses. It turns out Greek mythology is a popular source of nicknames. So I had to pick an original one because I didn't want to be like Icarus 47 Blue. That would have been stupid. I have to apologize for sucking. I am not naturally a public speaker. My natural environment, well, it's still, this computer thing is right in front of me, but the lights are all off. There's not a big room of people in front of me, and I can call people names through email, and then they won't yell at me back. It's a lot easier, for me anyway. Tell me to slow down. If I start talking really fast, and that's probably as much for the poor translator who's hiding behind me. Like I said, I'm not naturally a public speaker. I am a nerd. Nerds are inherently scared of people. We tend to talk faster when we get nervous, or at least I do. So if you start flinging your arms crazily about, what you're telling me here is, Rob, slow down. There's going to be, I guess, a Q&A at the end, but I'm not going to mind if you have questions. You can ask them. I'm not going to be like rigid and formal here. And we're going to talk about what is Slashdot. Like I said earlier, we are news for nerds. That might mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. On one day, I might be posting about Star Wars. On another day, I might be posting about Linux and open source. And I think a lot of the things that Slashdot covers these days is especially civil liberties in terms of how they are implemented on the internet, copyright law, basically all the things that maybe people were worried about a few hundred years ago on the printing press, freedoms of speech, those sorts of issues, how those pertain to the internet now. That's actually a major part of what Slashdot likes to cover. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the history of Slashdot. We're going to talk about what Slashdot looks like today. We are going to talk about the moderation system a little bit, which is part of what made Slashdot successful, is the ability for users to rate each other and to participate in this system together. And we're going to talk about our plans for what we plan to accomplish someday. I'm like using this computer screen. It's got like this split screen thing, so I can see when I keep checking to make sure that what I'm seeing is the same as what yours. I'm paranoid for some reason. And afterwards, I guess there's time for Q&A. But again, if you guys want to ask questions, I'm totally not going to tell. I'm totally down with that. Let's see. Take notes. There's a quiz. You'll be graded. People who fail, I don't know. I'm lying. There's actually not a quiz. All right. Set your Wayback Machine. We're going to go back in time to 1997. I was a computer science major and an art minor at a little college in Holland, Michigan. Holland is a nice Dutch community where I don't think that people in the Netherlands actually have wooden shoes, but in Holland, Michigan, they sure do. It's a sad little place. So at the time, I started writing a thing called Chips and Dips. Chips and Dips is what in 2007 you would call a blog. In 1997, we didn't call it blog because nobody was cool enough to have thought to, abbreviate a couple of words, and think, oh, web and then log, and if you take a couple letters off, then it's faster to say because we're all in a real big hurry on the internet for some reason. Chips and Dips was a blog, and I would write it pretty much every day. It would be maybe if I saw a movie, I'd tell you what I thought about the movie. The very inane and boring things that most blogs are about now. That was what my blog was about. The thing is that my web pages had a lot of Linux and open source related information on it. At the time, I was an active developer for a few different open source applications, and I would make graphics or logos or write code. And when I would put information up on my blog, a lot of times the information would be, I released a new version of this, or I found this other very useful Linux application. And what happened was, it turned out that there were a lot of other people that were reading my site because of that, because they really weren't interested in my opinion of popular movies, although they should have been, because my opinion of popular movies is always right. At the time, while a college student, I was a very busy person. I worked for several years as a tech support guy at a large company where I learned to load Windows. People's computers would break, and then I would have to go fix them. I would, for a couple of years in there, I did web design. It was apparently in 1996, 1998, somewhere in that range, everybody decided that they were going to start doing web design. Turned out I was kind of good for it. I was an art minor, so that was kind of, at the time, people who made web pages were either artsy-fartsies or they were hacker engineer types. And those two types of people, they don't mesh that well sometimes. Some people like to think in terms of functions and programming and variables, and other people are like, I like blue. They don't get along that well. I did websites for realtors, for banks, for all sorts of different things. But one of the things that I did in school was I wrote a Space Invaders clone. Everybody knows Space Invaders, the aliens come down, and you got to hide under your shield. It's an awesome game. So I wrote a little clone of it in Java, and it was for a homework assignment. And so this thing, it was no big deal. It took a couple afternoons to put together. I probably got an A- or something. And I put it up on my webpage, and some guys a few months later found it. And they're like, hey, this thing's really cool. If you change all the graphics, those little aliens, right? If you change that to popcorn, we can put it on our popcorn website. And if you do that, we have this little old DEC Alpha Maltia 66, and we don't need it, and you can totally have it. And come on, a free computer for a couple of minutes. All I had to do was draw a couple pieces of popcorn. It was awesome. So that computer became known as Ariel. Now, at the time, I was working at this web design place, and they needed an email server. And the reason that they needed an email server is that they were sharing their email with another company, and the founders of the company's name was Mark, and somebody already had the name Mark. So they had to have their own email service if he wanted to be Mark at his own domain name. So they're like, they needed to set up their own email server. And I'm like, well, I have this neat little box, which I named Ariel. And if you let me put this box on your network and set it up with email, then you can have Mark, you can be Mark, that'll be cool, and I'll just put my web page on it. Nobody will notice. That'll be fine. And they totally agreed. So I started writing Perl, a big, nasty pile of spaghetti code, because while I was a computer science major, I am not necessarily a good programmer. I am a fast programmer. If I need something, it will be made, and it will be made fast. It will not be pretty. It will not be modular and reusable code. There will not be comments. It will be a tangled, snarled mess. And you see this slide, it says 1997. These slides go up to like 2000, 2001, and it wasn't until like 2003 where they finally unsnarled it all. And then we had like a team of like 5 guys. It was not good for them. So, next up, we go forward a little bit. Slashdot is this tangled mess of spaghetti code. I put it on this machine. People start reading it. Works out pretty well. When we started off, we were getting maybe a couple thousand people reading it a day. We're all like, that's pretty cool. There's a couple thousand people reading this thing here on this little Slashdot website. And we enjoy it. And eventually, the machine that we're running on, this little DEC Alpha Maltia 66, starts freezing up. Because there's so many people reading this thing. And also because I'm a really terrible programmer. There's a lot of things that I can tell you how not to program. And we used to use mod CGI, and if anybody in here has used mod CGI, you know why it doesn't work when you have 50 or 100 people trying to read your web page at the same time. So each person that loads your web page is a separate copy of that program running on your computer. It has to be compiled individually. It's a real mess. So we actually go out and we get a new machine, which we call Triton. Now, when I say a new machine, it was actually an old machine that we just cobbled together the parts that we had in our basement. At the time, we were, me and most of the guys that ultimately came to work on Slashdot were all living together in a house that we called the Geek House. It was this little tiny place, and the landlord didn't mind if we drilled holes in the floor. So we would drill lots of holes in the floor because there wasn't wireless networking really back then. So, hey, look, there's a network. Plug the cable right through the hole. It was awesome. They had hardwood floors, too. It was a really nice little place. I feel guilty, but not very guilty. So, people are reading Slashdot. We're pretty happy about that whole thing. And then I read a little article at the time about Netscape. And what I talked about this is the very end of 97, early 98, I talk about how Internet Explorer is gaining market share, and everybody, everybody in here who used the Internet in 97 knows that you used Netscape. You just did. That was really the only choice. Like how now you only use Firefox. There is no other Internet Explorer. That browser doesn't even exist. Well, I read this little, I read this article saying that the only way that Netscape is going to conceivably able to keep up with Microsoft's billions and billions of dollars that they're going to put into Internet Explorer is if they open source, they give the source code. We didn't say open source back then. That term didn't come along until a little later. But if they give us the source code, and the reason for that is that I had been very experienced with Linux and the programs that, like the GUI programs and stuff, Enlightenment, the X11 applications that were at the time, because again, GNOME and KDE didn't exist yet. So, okay, release your source code, this is a great idea, we like to write code, we got time, we'll hack on it. Nobody would be crazy enough to use Internet Explorer in a universe where, you have this thing that is written by open source hackers because we're awesome. Well, like a week later after I wrote this, they actually did it, which... Okay, I didn't really cause them to do this. There were other reasons that caused them to do this. But because there was this serendipitous coincidence, a lot of people credited me as saying that, as getting them to do this. Now, I don't think that I've ever actually successfully made a billion-dollar company do anything, except send me cease and desist orders. At this time, we shot up to about 50,000 daily page views. That story was probably half of it right there. Just over the course of the 2 or 3 days before and after I wrote that one article, we basically doubled in size. This taught me a lot of things, mostly that I'm going to need more and faster hardware. I'm probably going to have to write better code, and that I'm going to probably need some help to do that, which is why I decided to make my source code open source as well. And that's still true today. The source code that powers Slashdot is actually available. It's at slashcode.com, and there's people here who are interested in Web 2.0 startups. You can download it, install it, have it, start your own Slashdot, compete with me, go for it. It'll be awesome for everyone. It's all right there, our moderation system. You can have it, have fun. We're excited about letting other people use it. We think that it's a good idea, and we're all about the exchange of information, the exchange of ideas. Go for it. Later in that year, we also had to encounter one of our biggest problems, which of course is advertising, because at this point, this was getting towards the end of my college career. At this point, I was working like 20 or 30 hours a week at my job, then another 20 or 30 or 40 hours a week on Slashdot, and then I still was trying to go to school full-time, and school doesn't pay you anything. They should pay you because it's hard and it sucks, but they don't. And Slashdot was not paying me anything, and my other job was not paying me much. So I did not have a lot of choice. So we put up our first banner ads. They were pretty tiny, unobtrusive. It was all right. And I was kind of amazed because people would actually like give me money in order to do this thing, and I'd been doing it for free at this point for almost a year, and all right, you want to pay me? Sweet. So at this point, the entire site was rewritten, mostly rewritten in about a 2-week span to use mod Perl and MySQL. Before that, all of my data storage was flat text files. And if you are an engineer, you know full well that when you're writing a website that's being used by 50,000 people a day, a flat text file is probably the worst possible data storage type that you can possibly use. Except that, I think my first web application, and when I say my first web application, I mean it like hello world, how every engineer writes their first thing and they have to learn how things work. Back then, they all used mod CGI, which is a terrible idea. They all used flat text files as their data storage. We were collectively idiots. You guys these days with your fancy Ruby, you have no idea. It's Ruby on Rails, it's so easy. Let's see, we're going to go forward another year. The site continues to grow. More and more people continue to read it, and I'm continuously amazed. And this entire time, about every 3 weeks, we'd be like, oh, now 60,000 people read Slashdot? That's as big as it can possibly get. 60,000 people, that's like probably everybody in the world. And they're all reading Slashdot. That's fantastic. During this time, I eventually quit my real job. I graduate from college. And this becomes my full-time job. And my job is to sit in a dark room and write code. And hopefully people will come and read Slashdot and click on our little banner ads. And some of them even do click on their banner ads. I end up hiring several of my friends. We form a small company called Block Stackers. And we operate this way for most of, basically we got up to about 2.5 years. And then we started discovering that when you run a small business, you start needing to do things like pay taxes and have health insurance. And it turns out that running a small business is incredibly hard. And that's not really what we're good at. We are good at, I'm good at writing a lot of really fast, writing code really fast that's really terrible. And other guys are really good at selling ads, and other guys are really good at writing stories. We're good at these things. None of us turns out that their life's ambition was to figure out how to make payroll checks. So at this point, a company named Andover comes along, and they decide that they make a good offer to buy us. And part of that offer is that we will be given jobs, and then we can use their human resources department and their health benefits, and we don't have to worry about any of that. And that's where I've basically been since then. Although the company's been bought and sold and traded, and it's a mess. I don't understand business. Over the course of 1999, we go from 50,000 to 500,000 daily page views. And again, about every week, I'm like, this is as big as it can possibly get. We would sit and look at our log files, and you use Unix hacks, tail-f. Tail-f, you can sit and you look up at your log file, watch it, and then it starts out, and then it's, and at first we're like, oh, that's so neat, it's MIT. Somebody from MIT is reading Slashdot. And then, then Microsoft, somebody at Microsoft is reading Slashdot. And by the end, it's just this blur, and now I don't think it would be even possible to look at that log and get anything meaningful out of it. At this point, we go from having one machine, that poor little Triton. That's the other thing that a corporation can do, is a corporation can actually spend money. People back in the late 90s would talk about, if you were in a web startup, they would talk about your burn rate, which is how much money you're spending every day. And usually what that meant is you were spending money into the hole. And we never spent money into the hole. We always broke even because we had to pay rent. We were a different sort of mentality about businesses. But when you work for a major company, you can start doing things like having 2 computers run your website. Not 1, 2. So, turns out in order to have 2 websites, there are 2 web servers run, then you have to do something called clustering or load balancing. You have to start having multiple pieces of hardware that's serving your website. This turns out it works really great because, when servers die, usually a server has a problem. It's going to have a problem at 4 in the morning, which means I'm going to get a phone call at 4 in the morning. And let me tell you, I am not a pleasant person at 4 in the morning. I would like to point out that on East Coast time, it is right now approximately 4 in the morning. So, I'm going to bite. I'm a little bit feisty about this. But if you have 2 computers and at 4 in the morning one of them dies, whatever, it'll be fine until 8. You can fix it at 8 because not a lot of people are awake at 4 in the morning. So, maybe it's a little bit slow, but there's only half as many of them, so they're half as likely to complain. Works out all right, I guess. The other thing that we discovered at this point is that you have to separate your database logic from your display logic. Now, this is a good old-fashioned engineering thing, and it makes total sense if you come back at it in hindsight and you look back. Of course, you've got your program is doing 2 things. It's getting data, and then it's displaying data. It would totally make sense for you to modularize that so that you can change one without changing the other. This had never occurred to me. As I'm like, I'll just type it out really fast, and it'll be done, and it'll work, and then I don't have to mess with it ever again. No. Turns out you have to separate these things. And at this point, since we were working for this company, they actually hired a couple of engineers to help me do this because I'm not like a details kind of programmer. I'm more like I'll get it done really fast kind of programmer. I think I said that before. At this point, this is by the very end of 1999, the company that bought us decided that they were going to have an IPO. Now, this was an interesting experience on many levels. When we went public, it was approximately around the same time as a company called Red Hat, another company called VA Linux Systems. There was basically a series of Linux-related IPOs in late 1999, early 2000, somewhere along that window. And Slashdot, core to our subject matter, was actually posting stories about the Linux industry. Red Hat does this, VA Linux Systems does this. This was what we covered. Well, when you're in an IPO, you're in a quiet period, and you're not supposed to talk about your company because that might influence the market unduly. And that turned out to be actually a real pain in the ass for us because this is the stuff we talked about, and then we couldn't talk about it, and we had to jump through weird hoops in order to make that work. I don't necessarily recommend it. It's not a particularly fun thing, and then, 2001, it really turned out to not be such a cool thing. So, let's see. Let's go forward to the year 2000. Y2K, it didn't kill us. That worked out pretty good. I was excited about that. We did go to the store and buy gigantic gallons of water and then tons and tons of junk food. Like, we had enough potato chips that if all the nuclear reactors on Earth did explode, we totally would have had all the Pringles and Doritos that we would have had no meat. We would have had no flashlight. You're supposed to have transistor radio. You're supposed to have all of these. We had nothing. But we were totally ready because we had Doritos and Pringles. We would have been 350-pound people, but we would have been ready. But, everything turned out all right. But what happened here was mergers and acquisitions and the board of directors, and that typo is on purpose. All of the other typos in my presentation is because I don't pay attention to typos. That typo is on purpose. Andover was bought by VA Linux Systems, as I mentioned earlier, one of the other IPOs from that period in the Linux market. They bought out our company, which was nice because when Andover bought Slashdot, I sat on their board of directors. And after a year of sitting on the company's board of directors, I realized that I was board of directors. And it turns out business stuff, not my deal. Again, my deal, video games, writing code, highly caffeinated beverages. These are all things that make me happy. And it turns out that when you are worried about being on the board of directors, you have to worry about things like profit margins and money, and then there's like stacks of paper like this thick that they want you to read. And first of all, paper? Seriously? People give me paper, I'm like, what is this? It's so quaint. It's adorable, you still use it. This is made of trees. So it took us, again, the rest of 2000 to finish abstracting the page logic out of our system. Because all of my code select all your data, start writing to the user about your data, repeat, and terrible. It took us the rest of that year. At this point, I think we had 3 engineers that were just trying to fix my terrible, terrible mess. And to be fair, it got worse. And again, if you go to www.slashcode.com, you can get the code, and you can reap the benefits of this abstraction. By merely editing templates, you can customize all the look and feel. It's beautiful and wonderful, and it brings a little tear to my eye. But, oh man, it hurt getting there. It hurt a lot. Now, the really scary thing is that over the course of this year, we actually went from serving maybe 500,000 pages to millions, like with an S on the end. That's a lot. And at this point now, I'm pretty sure that every geek on the internet does read Slashdot. Because, I mean, honestly, how many people, once you're serving millions of pages, how many people that are left, well, at least that are native English speakers. So I guess I could try to write my site in Spanish or Indian or something and get more, but I don't, I'm not even very good at Perl. I'm not really sure I'm ready to learn Spanish. Let's see. So let's see. What do we got from history lesson? Cache. When you're running a website, any piece of data that you need to look into your database and learn and get, if you can save that and then give it to somebody else later, that's a win. You save yourself some performance on that. And when you go from serving 10,000 to 50,000 to 500,000 to many millions of pages, at each step, you realize how much it hurts. And at each step, the more things that you can cache, the better. On Slashdot now, when you actually look at the page, almost everything that you see on that page is somewhere stored, pre-generated for you, pre-ready to go, and when you actually get that page, all it's doing is grabbing a couple of pieces and gluing them together and shoving them out to you. That is insanely important. Be redundantly redundant, and repeat yourself a lot, repetitiously. This is especially true in hardware, but also true in software. Whenever you can have 2 things do the job of 1 thing, that's better. Because if you have 2 things, 1 can break, and then you don't have to have your pager necessarily go off at 4 in the morning. Remember pagers? Nobody even has pagers anymore. How quaint! It's like paper. So yeah, over the course of those years, we actually went from having first just one computer that did everything, then 1 computer that was the database, and 1 computer that was the web server, then 2 web servers, then like 8 web servers, and now these days we have a lot of web servers. Single points of failure are awesome. If 1 thing can break, it will. That's Murphy's Law. But it hurt us a lot over the years. In fact, it wasn't until, I'm thinking 6 months ago that we got actually, that's not true. We still have 1 single point of failure left in our system. But up until 6 months ago, we still only had 1 master database. And oh my God, it's such terrible design. And every month we sit down and like it's time for a staff meeting, and we look at this thing. It's like, you know, if that computer dies, we are all hosed. And the best part is that computer, this was we didn't replace it until mid-2007. That computer we bought in 2001. Which, you know, just like the internet years is like 10 years, the hardware years is like a million years. Like, my laptops don't last more than a year and a half because I smashed them. But you just know that a database server that served at this point something like 1 billion web pages should probably break after 6 years. So, all right, here's my observation. The largest growth spikes in the last 5 years all occur when Slashdot breaks the mold. For Slashdot, we like to talk about Linux, we talk about open source, we talk about science fiction, and that appeals to my core audience. But over the years, a few events have occurred that were very far outside of that. Do people know about Columbine? I don't know if people know that out here, but it was a school shooting that happened in like '99 in the U.S., and it was a terrible tragedy. Also, September 11, that I assume everybody knows. But when these events occur, Slashdot doesn't generally cover normal mainstream media news. We're covering, you know, our own little subset. We're very deep into a very tiny little niche. But there was probably a dozen points in our history where something happened that was important enough that we decided that Slashdot actually had to cover it because, for various reasons. In the case of 9/11, CNN went down. So people wanted to know what was happening, and CNN crashed. So we would post stories to let people know for a couple of days basically what we found out as we found out about it. And at each point, we had a massive traffic spike in terms of the total number of people that would read Slashdot. I don't necessarily like that, but it's definitely something that turned out to be true. I'm going to talk a little bit about Slashdot today, which is my day job, way cooler than yours. I don't care what you do, unless you're like flying spaceships. If you're flying spaceships, I guess your day job is cooler than mine. And if you do, if I can like sit next to you, I'd dig that. I get up in the morning, and my job is basically to read all of the interesting things that have happened on the internet, and then decide which ones I think are the most interesting, and then share them with a bunch of other people. That's a pretty cool job. And I don't have to worry about hardly anything that's actually important, most of the time anyway, and it's a good deal. I mean, sometimes people like to tell me that I'm stupid, and by sometimes I mean every 7.5 seconds. But that's just how it's got to be, I guess. Let's talk a little bit about traffic. At this point, we're somewhere around 500,000 daily readers. We're somewhere around 3 million pages every day. And beyond that, we serve even more RSS feeds. It turns out it's a lot of people. I kind of like to measure it in terms of, at one point in like 1998 or so, we had more people reading Slashdot than lived in the town I was born. And then it was something like, in like 99 or something, there were more people that read Slashdot than read the newspaper in the big town that I could drive a couple of hours to get to. So I'm like, you guys suck. You know, you're just a newspaper. You're only read by a couple 100,000 people. But my ego really knows no bounds, is the deal. But Slashdot continues to serve an insanely large population of people. Every geek that is awesome is reading Slashdot. There's no doubt here. Probably a few that aren't too. Let's see. Right now we're sitting at around 20 to 25 machines. And I totally need to update this slide because we have one master database that we bought in 2000 and that thing got replaced and we all did a little dance. It was awesome. The worst thing is that we replaced this machine, right? And then what do? Is we make it do something else. So this machine is like 7 years old and it's going to die, you know, but it's still serving, it's still doing something. We're very frugal, I think is the deal. We have 4 slave databases that they're split out, they're specifically tuned to serve specific functions. One of them does nothing but searches. And, you know, honestly, doing searches on Slashdot, you should probably just use Google anyway. They do a better job than that sort of thing. But another one just does backups. It's just constantly making backups because, if you have one machine from from the year 2000 and you're expecting it to die, the least you can do is have a backup that's relatively up to date. The two slave boxes actually replicate all of the data from the master, and these machines, all of the other machines, we have 15 webheads. And all of those, they never actually talk to the master database. They only ever talk to the slaves. That way the master is basically free to make sure that everybody's playing nicely and all the expensive computational stuff is going to these individual webheads. And those machines have died. And when those machines die, we just replace them. It's not that big of a deal. Our webheads are divided up into several different groups. There's the static ones. Those basically serve nothing but, if you're an anonymous reader loading the index, which is like half of the people coming to Slashdot, you go to these specific webheads that are specifically highly tuned and highly optimized to give you back the 60 or 70K file over and over and over again. That's the same for everybody. There's no customization. There's no thinking. They're computationally cheap. We have a second cluster of dynamic machines. Those are, if you actually log in, and Slashdot has a plethora of options that you can configure and twiddle and manipulate. And I want this to be just like this. There's so many options you can customize it. Almost nobody does that sort of thing. And that's probably something that, since some of you folks are thinking about your fancy Web 2.0 startups and your high-tech stuff, almost nobody will customize anything. The defaults are the most important thing that you can do because nobody changes it. And the people that do change it are going to be your most hardcore readers, but they're going to be such a tiny percentage, which of course creates this ironic thing that the smallest population of people using your system are going to require the most time for you to engineer the stuff that they're going to want to use. Then we have an SSL box. That's just for encrypted traffic. Our editors all use Slashdot through an encrypted system, and if you give us some money, you can use Slashdot through an encrypted system, although I can't imagine why you'd really care. But there are some people who are so paranoid that I need to have my Slashdot encrypted. If I can get to Slashdot and it's not encrypted, then they will know. And we ask them who they are, and they can't tell us. And then they take off their little tinfoil hats, and it's pathetic. We also have a bunch of random other little boxes, an SMTP server, an NFS server for storing files, a box that just stores log files. It's ridiculous. Optimization tricks. The most important thing I think that we've figured out over the years is, and it's not so much that we figured it out over the years, is that MySQL has become increasingly good at replication. Historically, there's always been a little bit of a rivalry between MySQL and Postgres and maybe Oracle. But these days, MySQL's replication is pretty fantastic. You can have one machine be your master, or you can have two machines be your master and replicate to each other, and then they can make copies down to your slave. So you could have 10 different SQL servers, and you could have one of those servers indexing certain tables and another one's indexing other tables, so you can highly tune the performance of each of these machines to do certain things. It makes for a more complicated system to maintain, but it means you can do far more with less hardware. And we don't really have a lot of hardware, given that we're serving millions and millions of pages a day. A lot of our stuff is even pretty old. I mean, who would keep a machine around from 2000? But hey, that would just be crazy. Memcached, absolutely critical if you're a Perl or using most web design stuff. Memcached, it's sort of a bucket. It sits in between MySQL and your web server, and if you ask MySQL, give me all the information about Joe, and all the information from Joe then sits in Memcached, and that's all in RAM. So then, from then on, for the next few minutes or whatever, anytime your web server asks for Joe, they don't actually have to ask the web server. The web server asks Memcached. Gives it back. It's in RAM. It's fast. It's awesome, and it saves. We fully optimized Memcached. We ended up going from having thousands of SQL requests a second down to hundreds. You can get by with a heck of a lot less database if you use things like Memcached. Another trick that we figured out over the years was Webhead Diversification. This is what I mentioned earlier, how we have machines that specifically store or specifically serve static web pages, and then others that specifically serve dynamic ones, and others that serve encrypted ones. The more you can specialize your webheads to serve specific types of data, the more they can be optimized. In fact, we've actually gone a little bit further now. We have a machine that just is doing AJAX requests. It's pretty cool. It's definitely very important. All right, we're going to change gears a little bit. We're going to talk about the story selection process. There's enough for a couple minutes talking about boring hardware and electronics and software. Slashdot is about Linux, it's about open source, it's about Legos, it's about Star Wars, it's about Star Trek. It's about the government trying to check what color underwear you're wearing. It's about the RIAA suing everybody because you want to have a copy of your CD that you bought on your iPod and on your computer. Oh my goodness. There's a lot of crazy stuff here. We have a group of people that actually post these stories. Timothy Zonk, Scuttle Monkey. Some of those names are real. Some of those names are fake. They're all very real people. Those are the prime time guys. Then there's a few other folks that have been doing this for a long time as well, part-time. Hemos and Cowboy Neil have both been doing this on Slashdot now, along with me, for almost 10 years now. We divide our day up in what we call daddy pants. We basically divide the day up into 3 shifts, morning, afternoon, and evening. And during each of those 3 shifts, somebody is wearing the daddy pants. Their job is to read through submissions from our readers, of which there is an avalanche, and to basically pick one of these stories and post it probably about every 45 minutes or so during the busiest parts of the day, and maybe every 70 or 80 minutes over the course of the night. There's usually somewhere around 500 of these things a day, and most of them are early in the morning, 7 in the morning to 1 p.m. Eastern time. So during the morning, it's like playing a game of whack-a-mole. It's like read, crap. It's fast, and it takes a long time to get used to this. We're usually posting somewhere around 20 stories a day. Some days there's a little bit more. Zonk actually posts a section just for games, just for video games. So there's actually a lot more stories if you look in the video game section. In terms of what we're looking for in specific stories, grammar, spelling, whatever. Oh, that's another typo on purpose. I've never considered Slashdot to be, we're not the New York Times, we're not the Wall Street Journal, we're not the mainstream news. We don't think that spelling and grammar is the most important thing. Slashdot, it grew out of a blog. Okay, it didn't grow out of a newspaper, and certainly we steal liberally elements from both blogs and from mainstream press, but I don't necessarily think that being formal is the key. I think that maybe a better way to think about it is that we speak perhaps using the language of the internet. And I assure you this isn't something that we did on purpose. I can express this to you now verbally, but it just sort of happened this way because basically I'm lazy. But I would post stories, they would be stories that I would write in my words. And they wouldn't be, my words are, I'm an engineer, a bad engineer that likes to write code and stuff. I'm not going to worry about the correct spelling and the correct grammar. And I think that over the years, we've seen more of that, things like texting, and there's another language kind of sprouting up, and, it makes English teachers cry. But I mean, English is already a screwy language, so that should be okay. They should just understand that it's only going to get worse. If it starts bad, it really can only get worse. Rob Limo actually calls it Rob's folksy charm. I call it, the fact that I'm lazy. But he prefers to think that it's like something that is on purpose. The curse of PR, a lot of the stories that we see in Slashdot are actually just press releases. And I think that the more that you look at the way that information spreads around the internet, the more you see that press releases are actually a substantial portion of that. Corporations write a neatly formatted, thing expressing exactly what they want you to think. And you really have to avoid that. Press releases can be, they can absolutely be legitimate, but you can't really take them all that seriously. And the problem for us is that we get a lot of press releases, and we have to weed through them fairly rapidly. The biggest thing when I'm taking a Slashdot story, or when I'm posting it, is that I need it to stay on target. When somebody submits a story to Slashdot, they like to be wordy. They like to say, hey guys, I love Slashdot, I read it every day, I found this story, I think it's neat, you might like it, it's about Joe, Joe did this, I think Joe's kind of a jerk, we should all get Joe. Okay, that's actually pretty accurate to how a lot of submissions work. The problem is that almost everything at the beginning of that, Slashdot is great, well, obviously true, this is not core to the story. And then also that little thing at the end where it says, and we got to get Joe, that's not really core to the story either. I don't want to necessarily tell people that this is how they need to act, and I don't necessarily need to spend all this time belaboring that this guy thinks Slashdot is great. I just need to say, this is what Joe did. So a lot of what we do is simply taking this thing that somebody wrote us, which might be 2 or 3 paragraphs long, and stripping it down to just 2 or 3 sentences, the most core key thing. And you want to get this discussion off on the right foot, because every Slashdot story is followed by a discussion. And if I start that story off by saying, let's get Joe, then a whole bunch of that discussion is just going to be, how do we get Joe? Why do we get Joe? Should we get Joe? And how dare Slashdot ask us to go get Joe? But what we really want them to talk about is what Joe did. There's actually, if people want to act upon something, great. But we just want to give them a place to start the discussion. And I think that's a very important thing. Also, proper linkage and giving credit where it's due. Everything that we get on Slashdot is pretty much coming from a reader. And it's very important to us that the reader that spent their time to give us this information gets credit for their contribution. And then also, they provide the right hypertext. So you're looking at a big paragraph, and somewhere in the middle of it is a couple of words that are underlined. And because you are familiar web-savvy individuals, that if you click on those underlined words, that you're going to go to that web page. I think that it's really important what those words that are underlined are. For example, the worst possible word that you can underline is here. I found a really great web page here. This infuriates me, because here is stupid. It's redundant. Of course you're going to click here. It's underlined. You're wasting everybody's time. It's very important that you choose the right words, the thing that express what you're actually trying to get to. Again, I don't think that it matters if you spell a word correctly or if you have bad grammar, but for crying out loud, underline the right word. Again, as we kind of grow up with this different language, this different way of communication, there are different rules that I think are much more important. So everything on Slashdot has comments attached to it. We have these big discussions. Oh, so exciting. They are the core of Slashdot. I say that with a question mark because a lot of people think that the comments are the only part of Slashdot that actually matter. And it's easy to think because you're talking about sometimes as many as 10,000 comments a day. The bulk of our busy. They got time. They got time to spend on other important things. I don't understand what's more important than Slashdot, but to them, maybe it's important. Maybe they have to go to the hospital. Because if you have to go to the hospital, that's more important than Slashdot. Or maybe your boss just came into your office. In that case, you should probably put something on your computer screen that looks like work. And Slashdot does not look like work. But the thing is that 25% of our population is a lot of people still, and 10,000 comments is a lot of comments, which is why over the years, we've built this moderation system, which is where we can make our users do the work. 10,000 comments is a lot, and I tell you, I don't have time to read 10,000 comments, and this isn't about me being lazy for once. This is about 10,000 is a lot. It's a big number. And I don't have that kind of time. I have to respond to all the people who want to write me emails to tell me how much I suck. And that's going to take a lot of time. I should hire a secretary for that. Over the years, we've sort of evolved this system that allows those 10,000 people to play together. And there's kind of a couple of different goals here. One is that some of you guys are really busy, and some of you guys want to go to a /out discussion, and you just want to see a couple of comments. But you want to see the best comments because you're busy and you don't want to waste a lot of time. You want to get the feel of what the community thinks about something. And when you have thousands of people that are participating every day, it seems like you should be able to figure that out. So what happens is we have all of our comments in our system are rated from -1 to 5. -1 is basically absolute garbage. Your mama sucks, and maybe spam. Just mean stuff, things that have no purpose. And you'll see labels attached to these things that will say things like informative or troll. Terms to try to give you a better feel of what the comments are actually saying, or not necessarily tell you what the comment is about, but to give you some sort of assessment of what the comment could maybe give you. Now the trick here is that you want to figure out who gets to play within your system. And what we've done is we've taken the bell curve of our readers, and we've tried to figure out what is a typical reader. And we've done that in a number of places. For example, if we gave you moderation points a few weeks ago, did you use them good? Well, that's probably a pretty good indicator of if you're the kind of person that we want in the system. Karma, which is if you posted a comment and a bunch of readers said it was a good comment, you're probably going to be the kind of guy that we want to be allowing to play in our pool. Experience. If you go and create an account right now, you won't get points. You probably won't get points for a few weeks or a few months, because we actually want to make sure that the people that are participating in our system represent typical /dot readers. So the thing is, how do you keep an eye on all of this? There's 10,000 comments out there. There's thousands of people moderating. And how do I know that they're all playing nicely? Well, what we have is a system called meta-moderation, which is something kind of like jury duty. I don't know if that translates. Do you guys have juries out here? I don't know how that works. But basically, what we get is a panel of experts. And I say experts in quote because if you're an expert, if you're willing to click on a link, not exactly a great way to indicate your expertise. I can click on a link, and I'm barely qualified to tie my own shoes. The experts are basically they're given a sampling of comments, a random sample of right now 10 comments on /dot, and these are all comments that actually have been moderated by other people. So somebody said this comment was informative, somebody else said this comment was troll, and then the jury is asked to say, well, was that decision fair or unfair? And it turns out that this actually works pretty well. Because if you look at a comment and see somebody calling somebody a name, it's pretty obvious that that person is flame baiting or trolling. Our terms are pretty abstract. They're pretty easy to understand, and it's pretty easy for if you get 3 or 4 people and show them this thing, they're probably going to be right. And what you're really looking for is extreme outliers. Like if I ever find a comment where 4 people said that it was moderated badly, betcha that comment was moderated badly. It's a little bit tricky sometimes because you lack context, because I'm giving you these 10 comments randomly, essentially. So it might be you're reading a story about a video game, and so here's a comment about a video game, and then the very next comment might be a story about some law getting passed about voting machines, or another one, these stories completely unrelated, completely out of context, and then we're asking this meta-moderator to make a decision about this, and they may not have read that original story. So it requires a fair amount of effort on their part. The other problem is ultimately people are lazy. They're busy, they don't want to do extra things, you're beeping. Mine's on too, but for some reason I don't have any bars. I guess I'm like on the wrong continent.
Let's see. Well, M2 meta moderation is our major bottleneck for the moderation system because we might have, in the course of a week, tens of thousands of comments get moderated, but we are not necessarily always able to get 3 or 4 or 5 people to actually look at each of those cases. They look at a lot of them, in fact, most of them. But it can take 5 or 6 weeks for a comment to actually get fully, to have 3 or 4 or 5 other people actually look at it. Now, the problem is that this system actually is fairly elaborate, and people like to play a game with it. It turns out people like to play games. I like to play games. I got Pokemon in my bag. And people will treat everything as a game. One of the ways that they do it is called karma whoring. So what they'll do is they'll post a comment that will say, Linux is awesome. And on Slashdot, a lot of people like Linux. So if you post a bunch of comments saying Linux is awesome, people are going to probably agree with you and they're going to moderate you up, which means you're going to slowly accumulate karma. And then they can turn around and post a bunch of stories that says, your mama likes to eat poop. And because they've accumulated all this karma within the system, they have a certain amount of flexibility. They can post a bunch of comments. They can get away with it for a few minutes. And people will basically ride this wave where they'll post a bunch of really obvious, boring comments but that agree with the general community, and then they'll use that all up and they'll spend it to be a jerk. And you laugh, but people do it. And they are obviously people that have far more spare time than me. This is very related to the problem of trolling. Trolling would be when somebody would post a comment intentionally designed to inflame you. The story might be, a very obvious story, a simple story, and they're going to post the thing that is so obviously untrue and a lie that they're just trying to get you. And that totally works because you'll actually see that and a bunch of people reply to them. And it was like, oh yeah, you're such a jerk, and how dare you say that, and you're a liar. And I like to think of them just sitting in their cubicle going, it's not good. But that's some of the things that we have to deal with. Perhaps the most annoying of these things is crap flooding, where people will actually write a program that all it does is post a bunch of crap. And we've seen so many different variations of that. They'll take random Wikipedia articles, splice them up, randomize all the words, and paste them. I mean, some people basically do it just as graffiti, and that's, I don't know. It's just something that is something we just constantly have to deal with. As part of that, we've had to put up a host of security measures. One of them is that we actually monitor IPs. Now, the thing about Slashdot is I actually don't store your IP. I don't want to know. I don't want to know what your IP is. If the government comes knocking and says, tell us who this guy is that said this thing, I don't want to know. So I don't store anything. So I crypt it all. So it's all random. But I can tell you if the same IP said anything. I just can't tell you what IP that actually is. You can look at that history on any given IP, and you can actually often see, let's say, a history of abuse. If you're a jerk on Monday, there's a good chance you're going to be a jerk on Tuesday. The other thing is we track your karma. If you post a bunch of good things, you post a bunch of bad things. We can start algorithmically seeing that wave, and that's something that we can definitely keep an eye out for. Proxy testing. So this is one of the biggest things that's a problem these days. There's proxy servers everywhere. Proxy servers let you anonymously relay your request to the internet through them, which basically means 1,000 people could be using a single machine all anonymously. And usually when people do those crack flooding graffiti robots, that's what they're actually using. Part of how you deal with that is what we call form keys. When you actually create a form for somebody to fill out, you give them a token, and then when they submit that code, when they submit that actually back, you make sure that they have that token, and then you make sure that the token that you started at, or the IP that you were posting from before and after are the same. You can also check things like how long went by. If only 1 second went by, that person probably didn't actually type anything, because anything that you can type in 1 second is probably not worth reading. But you can look at that to get a lot of information about if that is safe or not, or if that person should be trusted. You've got rate limiting. If you posted something 20 seconds ago, maybe you can just sit and chill out for a couple of minutes. And of course, CAPTCHA, where they make you, here's a bunch of random letters that you can barely read, and we've drawn lines through it. And then you can't actually read it because there's lines through it, and it's completely, yeah, we do that, but they're kind of annoying. But one of the most important things that we've learned over the years is simply that you should avoid numbers. When people see a number, they think it's score, and be that karma, be that the score -1 to 5. When they see a number, they think that that is a game, and when people see a game, they want to play. It's things you can deal with, you can host them. There's actually a forum on Slashdot where people do nothing but try to crap flood Slashdot. And it's been going on now for 5 or 6 years. And it's kind of neat, but it means when they figure out a new way to do it, we can stop them. I don't know why they do it, but it works. You can visit them. In the case of Slashdot, there are entire websites dedicated to talking about how much Slashdot sucks. So you can read their website and they're like, look at how much they suck. I posted this comment and I told them how much they suck right on their webpage. Hey, people are not always the smoothest when they want to mess with you. You can code tools to research them, and I think this is probably one of the most important things, is that you don't want to waste a lot of time, but you can actually code simple things to act as sort of leverage. You can look at all of your traffic history, at patterns of the numbers of things posted from a single IP. Anything that you can code that gives you leverage, that saves you time, is going to help you out. You can offer bounties. We've never done that, but other people have tried it. And of course, you can sue them because I live in America. That seems to be the solution to pretty much everything. Again, not really my deal, but you definitely see it. I have 10 seconds left on 60 minutes, but I guess I lost like 5 or 10 minutes for the others. You want me to kill now? All right, I'll go really fast. I got 3 slides left. Principles. You're designing a game. When you put up a website, you're designing a game. You may not think you're designing a game, but you are, because people want, if they're going to participate in your system, they are thinking of it as a game. Even if they don't consciously think of it as a score, they are thinking of it as one. You have to know your motivations of the people who are trying to screw with you. If it's just graffiti, that's a motivation. Spammers, they have a motivation too to get people to click on their website to buy their free iPod or whatever it is that they're spamming. Viagra for some reason. You have to know your resources. You can never underestimate the amount of time that an infinitely large population can spend. They will screw with you. They have all the time in the universe to do it, and you are probably a very small individual or maybe a couple of people, and anything that you can do to make your time be more well spent against them, that's what you've got to focus on. And you have to make your attackers spend. They can spend a lot of things. They can spend time. You can make them wait 30 seconds in between posts, for example. They can spend IPs, proxy servers, multiple user accounts. They're going to figure out ways to spend it, and you're going to have to make sure that they do to defend your system. And seriously, I wasn't kidding a couple slides back. Avoid numbers, because if it's a score, they're going to think of it as a video game. All right, so plans for Slashdot, and I will haul. We're in the process of redesigning our moderation system to make it a little bit more tag-based. Right now, our moderation system uses labels like troll and insightful. We want to expand it to allow readers to contribute more to that, so that they can further clarify discussions. For example, in political discussions, it would make total sense in America anyway to have Republican and Democrat as moderation. Doesn't always make sense, but for certain discussions, you want to make that possible. Right now in Slashdot, some of our moderation is not moderatable. For example, underrated, overrated. There are terms that it's hard to assign context and meaning to them, so we have to fix that. Right now, our moderation system, the actual display system, has a difficult time distinguishing between comment quality and comment quantity. With your rating scores from scores -1 to 5, and you come in as a user, you might have 20 minutes. And if that story is really new and you've got 20 minutes, there might only be 20 comments, 20 minutes worth. So you're going to get it all. That's not necessarily a measure of quality. That's just a measure of quantity. And right now we've been working on a new system, our Discussion 2 revision, which is if you log in and click a little checkbox, you can see it now. It's a fancy dynamic AJAX. You drag sliders and things load in place. It's very fancy and modern and high-tech, and very much not how I would have written it in 1997. But that system actually does a really good job of helping make that more powerful and making quality and quantity more easily distinguishable. Of course, scalability is always our problem, and this isn't about hardware or software. This is actually about the number of readers who are participating in the system. As the number of readers increase, we need to make sure that the accuracy of our moderation system scales with it. We know that more points has the potential for being more accurate, but right now on our system that isn't always the case. Also, the CSS, XHTML, AJAX, the buzzword soup. We're working on a thing called the Firehose right now, which is a fully AJAXified version of Slashdot with some fancy new things. All of these things, they're fancy, they're exciting, they're going to be the future of the internet, and of course we want to be a part of that because we're so awesome, sort of. And an hour 4, and you got questions, I got answers, and I won't lie all the time, but I'm not going to tell you which times I'm lying and which times I'm telling the truth, so it'll be very difficult to distinguish. That's all I got. Now you can ask questions, or we sit down at the chair. All right.
It's been interesting, it's been fun, and it's been fast. Rob, sorry, I feel guilty. I'm using paper.
Oh, a tree died for that. I only sacrificed coal and nuclear power.
José Antonio del Moral from Alianza and Rob Malda will have a chat.
Is this working?
Tap, tap, tap. Mine is.
Mine no.
See, technology works for me.
Well, in the meanwhile, I will try to shout. Okay, Rob, thank you very much for your conference. I'm wondering if you could talk somehow about Dig. So Dig is something new, quite new. Last year, very important. It became very important. So how is that interesting for you?
So the big difference between Dig and Slashdot is that Dig is theoretically the content on the Dig's homepage is determined by the readers, whereas on Slashdot, our content is generally determined by a small cabal of secretive and evil editors. I think that there are advantages to both, and I think that part of the thing on Dig is that they do exercise editorial control. It's just more secretive than ours. Our editorial control is we're editors, we choose. And theirs is that sometimes stories mysteriously disappear. So they have a different system, but they have a lot of the same issues to address. They do it in different ways. I think that there are advantages to either system and problems to either system. I personally think Reddit does a better job. Reddit does a lot of the same things that Dig does in terms of user participation. I think they do a better job, but they don't have quite the same hype. But again, all of those systems have a problem with hype, which is that the more people participate in a system like that, the more noisy they get. A panel of 5 people might be pretty smart, a panel of 100 might be a little bit smarter, and if you get 1,000 people, you're going to get 3 people in there that just want to be a pain. And that's just kind of the nature of larger crowds. The other thing is that when you have a large crowd, sometimes there's a difference between the wisdom of the masses and then the tyranny of the mob. And it's difficult to see, at what point you've crossed the line from being a very wise crowd to just being a mob. One of the sites that tried to do what Dig and Reddit both do now earlier was a site called Corrosion. And around 2000, this site was very popular, and it was run by a lot of people who left Slashdot. And they were like, we don't like Slashdot because Slashdot's editors are a closed group and we don't get to see and participate. So we're going to run our own thing, and everybody will vote, and that's how stories will end up on our webpage, very much like how Dig and those sites operate now. And once upon a time, the top story on their webpage was all about a guy telling a story about his hemorrhoids. And that's what happens sometimes when you let a crowd make a decision. A crowd can very often get it right, and for Slashdot anyway, I have a serious problem with that because sometimes the crowd gets it wrong. When they get it wrong, they can really, really, really get it wrong. And I can look at like network TV, and I can see, you know, what happens when crowds get to choose what's popular. It's a hard thing.
Great.
Yeah, it's working now. Is there any question from anybody over there? Yeah, not yet. Well, it will come. I would also like to know, Rob, if you are sure that deciding to keep your news about science fiction, about Lego, or about free software, at the end was a good decision. Because Vic has more.
Yeah, they've thrown a broader net.
subject.
I said this earlier, but I like to think that Slashdot is incredibly deep within a very, very tiny niche. Slashdot is news for nerds, and I think that you know, sometimes I'm interested in Legos, and sometimes I'm interested in Star Trek, and other times I'm interested in Linux and open source. And if I want to read about wars or politicians, you know, I can go to CNN. I can go somewhere else and I can get that. I would rather, for Slashdot anyway, I really prefer to keep Slashdot subject matter focused on the areas that our community has a unique and strong perspective on. I wouldn't necessarily want to post, I was an art minor, and I wouldn't necessarily want to post stories about artists onto Slashdot, because that isn't really the community that's there. These people aren't necessarily experts on the matter. I prefer to post stories to Slashdot where I think that the community that's there is somewhat expert, and so that when I look at those discussions, that I can get back the opinions of experts. And so when subject matter expands beyond the niche of things that I think our community becomes expert in, I think that the quality of the discussions that are attached to those stories begins to disintegrate a little bit, because everybody has opinions, and not everybody is actually qualified. Slashdot would not be the place to talk about, you know, so many things that are very important in the real world. And every now and then Slashdot has to break in and post something from the real world, from the mainstream news. But I really try to keep that as the exception and not the rule. I think it's much more important that Slashdot focus on the places and things that we know the best, because otherwise we're just talking to ourselves about things we don't really know.
Okay, if any question is coming in the meanwhile, you can just put up your hand. I think we have a question here, so if we could get him the microphone, please.
I was curious, who actually commercializes your advertising, and if they're public, what are the annual sales figures for advertising?
Okay. Right now, Slashdot is owned by a company called VA Software. They are publicly traded. In terms of what their financials are, I honestly wouldn't know. My job is purely production. And I've intentionally washed my hands of everything relating to business because Slashdot might post a story about Microsoft, or we might post a story about Novell, we might post a story about SCO. I really try to keep away from that because I don't necessarily want to be influenced by knowing who is advertising when. I am involved in the advertising to a certain extent because actually those ads have to actually physically be on Slashdot. So I'm involved insofar as I have to make sure that the ads work. I have to make sure that they don't break browsers, that they're compatible with browsers, and that they fit within our requirements. But in terms of in terms of who the people are actually serving the ads, and how much money that actually brings in, I intentionally try to keep myself away from that because I feel that my role at Slashdot is to act sort of as the advocate of the user, and not to act as the advocate of the business. There are a couple of people at the company who their job is to worry about the business, and then we get to fight because I wear my hero of the user, and they wear their we want to make money hats, and then we fight, and then hopefully come to a happy ending and all that. If you want the business stuff, I can give you email addresses, and they will tell you all that, and all the information. We're a publicly traded company, so it's all in big spreadsheets. They tell me that Slashdot makes money, but we're just one business unit. And they haven't fired me, so I assume that we're making at least enough to pay my salary, and we have like 10 full-time employees just on Slashdot. So we're doing all right.
Is there any other question? There's one question over there. What, in the meanwhile, is it true that your wife said yes to you when you asked her for
Yes.
marriage?
Yes.
Because you posted it on Slashdot?
Yeah, I posted. I proposed to my wife on Slashdot, and I have the fancy jewelry to prove that she said yes. It so far has worked out just fine. So far.
How long a wait?
How long of a wait?
No, I mean, how many years ago?
We've 6 years, 5 years. Well, we've been together for like 7 or 8, almost the entire time that Slashdot's been running. And she obviously has been a reader.
Whenever you have fight, you also use Slashdot?
Oh yeah, but I post on Slashdot to say that she's wrong, and then I let people vote.
Okay.
I would probably be in much trouble if I tried to do that.
He's asking something.
Thank you. I was quite amazed when I read when you were saying that 25% of your traffic and of your users come from comments or are active commenters. Are those data real, or was this an estimation? Because they say
round numbers. I can get you more accurate numbers if you're curious. It varies from month to month and from week to week. 25 is a round number. It could be 22% one week, 28% another week, 33% another. 50. It goes all over. But 25% is pretty typical.
Okay, that does amaze me because I think that in Spain it'll be like 1%.
Yeah, well, and that's people who are generally reading the comments. The percentage of people who are actually posting them is actually more like 3%. And then the people who actually are moderating are probably like 2%. But it's basically about a quarter of our audience cares about the forums, and then a much smaller percentage of them are actually posting. But again, in terms of man hours and hardware required to support, that 25% is very, very human man-hour expensive. It costs us more I spend more time worrying about comments than I do the entire rest of the system, even though it's only a quarter of the traffic.
We are going to finish here because we are running quite late and there's a coffee now. Whenever you can ask questions in Spanish or in Basque also, or in French even. I mean, English is just for them speaking here, but you can use any language you want, okay? Okay, so now we have a coffee. It's upstairs in the cafeteria of the Guggenheim Museum, and we'll be back here in 50 minutes.
I needed butter bad.